video of a SWAT team arriving at the house, plus an ABC News interview with his father, who's now under police investigation for his role in helping his son get a gun permit. Alex Perez is in Highland Park with the report. Russian President Vladimir Putin issues a stark message after 5 months of war in Ukraine. He warned Ukraine's leaders that they should accept Russia's terms or brace for the worst, adding that Russia has barely started its action. In a meeting with Parliament, he accused Western allies of fueling the hostilities. ABC's James Longman has that, plus the latest from the front lines in the war. In his first television interview, the director of the U.S. Marshal Service talks with our own Pierre Thomas about efforts to curb rising crime rates, his concerns about increased threats against public officials, and how his own background shapes his views on law enforcement.
I know my colleagues are some outstanding, honorable, ethical men and women, but I still have to have the talk with myself before I would get in the keys of that car.
A new AMC series features a future utopian society on the moon racing to save a dying Earth. But do the residents of Earth want to accept the solution? I talked with actress Emma McDonald about her leading role in the show. And ABC's Martha Raddatz talks to two Vietnam War heroes, one American, the other Vietnamese, about their friendship forged in war and their search to restore their connection after it ended.
Yeah, we knew we were bonded for life. And hopefully we will not be separated until time to leave is upon us.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. We begin with a surprise admission that could very well change the legal and diplomatic fate for one of the most successful female athletes in the world. WNBA star Brittany Griner appeared in a Russian courtroom once again today, where she pled guilty to drug possession and smuggling charges in her trial following her arrest for bringing vape cartridges of hashish oil into the country. Griner's case has been watched closely in the U.S. In recent days, the Biden administration has faced increased pressure to gain the Olympian's release after 140 days in detention. Today's guilty plea comes days after Griner sent a handwritten letter to President Biden pleading for assistance. And today we learned that Biden wrote her back. That letter was hand-delivered directly to Griner today in court. And tonight we take a look at the implications of all this and what it could mean for Griner's potential release. On this day 2 of her trial, WNBA star Brittany Griner entered a plea of guilty to drug charges in Moscow. Griner saying, "I would like to plead guilty on the charges against me, but I had no intention on breaking any Russian law. I was in a rush packing and the cartridges accidentally ended up in my bag. I would like to give further testimony later, not today." Griner, dressed in all red, clutching a photo of her wife. ABC News was inside the courtroom while Griner was led into a holding cell. Our producer asked her a question before being ushered out of the room.
Brittany, do you want to say something to ABC News?
The two-time Olympic gold medalist was arrested back in February while flying back through Moscow's airport after visiting the country to play during the WNBA's offseason. Russian authorities have extended her detention until at least December 20th. They allege that Griner was carrying vape cartridges containing hashish oil, an offense punishable by up to 10 years in prison.
She realized that this trial could go on for months and that if she indeed wants to take advantage of a potential prisoner swap, the best way to expedite this would be, unfortunately, to plead guilty.
The Russians would likely want to release Griner in a prisoner exchange for Victor Bout, a notorious Russian arms dealer serving a 25-year sentence in the U.S. Griner writing to the White House, pleading for her release. "I'm terrified I might be here forever. I still have so much good to do with my freedom that you can help restore," adding, "Please don't forget about me and the other American detainees." President Biden responded by sending Griner a letter, which she was able to read. The president also called her wife, Sherelle, with Vice President Harris.
This has been top of mind for the president. He receives daily updates about the status of her negotiations to secure Brittany's release, and the U.S. government continues to work aggressively, using every available means to bring her home.
The Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergei Ryabkov, said the hype around the Griner case isn't helping her cause. And while all eyes are on Griner, the sister of Paul Whelan, the former Marine also detained in Russia since 2018, spoke out, tweeting, "Still looking for that press release saying the President of the United States has spoken to anyone in our family about Paul Whelan, wrongfully detained in Russia for 3.5 years. I am crushed." But the pressure to get the Phoenix Mercury star home is not letting up.
She's incarcerated with people that mostly cannot talk her language. And I wanted to pray with her to give her some spiritual strength and to let her know that people around the world have not forgotten her.
In an open letter signed by more than 1,000 black female leaders, including legendary coach Dawn Staley, activist Bernice King, and Tina Knowles-Lawson, they write to the president, "The rhetoric does not appear to align with the actions taken to date." And in Phoenix, thousands of miles from Moscow, her friends and family rallying for her freedom.
President Biden, please help bring BG home.
As the days continue to increase that my wife is wrongfully detained in Russia, I've adapted her mindset in my efforts to get her home by going, no matter what or how I feel. I honestly can't rest until she's home.
Griner is expected to appear in court on July 14th for the third day of her trial. Let's go now to ABC's Rachel Scott, who's outside the White House for us tonight. Rachel, Russians have signaled interest in that prisoner swap with Victor Bout, but what's the likelihood of that happening?
Well, Lindsay, I can tell you that they really do not want to release him, but at the same time, they want to do everything possible, they say, to try and get Brittany Griner as well as Paul Whelan home. Still, they are being very tight-lipped about this because they really don't want to say anything publicly that could possibly put any of this in danger, getting them released and returned back to the United States. Some experts say, though, that these negotiations will be on pause between Russia and the United States until after this trial is over. They say that might be part of the strategy here and why Brittany Griner decided to plead guilty. Lindsay?
And Rachel, you asked the White House today about Paul Whelan. What was the response?
Yeah, well, they say that they are committed to doing everything that they can to also bring him home as quickly as possible. But you heard from his family those pleas saying that he has also written letters to the administration over the course of 3 years of being detained. His family has been pleading for a meeting with the president. They say they are still waiting. We pressed and we asked whether or not that meeting or that call would actually happen. And the White House says as of now, they have no call to read out. Lindsay?
Yeah, his sister very frustrated. Rachel Scott, our thanks to you. Now to the investigation into the deadly parade shooting in Illinois. We're getting new details about the suspect charged in the 4th of July attack, and they're raising more questions about possible missed warning signs. ABC's Alex Perez has the latest.
Tonight, growing questions about how the suspect in the July 4th rampage was able to legally buy 5 firearms despite the red flags. His father, who sponsored the application for his son's gun permit because he was under 21, now telling ABC News he doesn't regret it.
They do background checks, whatever that entails. I'm not exactly sure.
Bob Crima saying it was up to law enforcement to vet him. Investigators say just months before, his son attempted suicide and later threatened to kill family members. The father says he didn't know about the suicide attempt and didn't believe the other threat was real.
Making threats to the family, I think it was taken out of context where it's like just a child outburst, whatever he was upset about.
But that same day, officers confiscating more than a dozen knives, a dagger, and a sword from the home. The father now could face criminal charges for sponsoring that gun permit application.
We've seen more prosecutors being more aggressive with parents who should have done more to stop something like this from happening. So the maximum kind of charge that he could potentially face would be something like involuntary manslaughter.
The night before that horrific attack, Crima's father insists they had a normal conversation and his son was in a great mood.
I had not an inkling, warning that, something like this was going to happen. I'm shocked.
After police say his son confessed to killing 7 people and wounding more than 30, Bob Crima is blaming the system.
We need to come together, just as a community here in the country, to come up with something, whether it's new laws, guidelines, to prevent this from happening again, because it continues to happen.
And tonight, we're learning police were called to the family home a number of times since 2002, mainly domestic calls. Only a few involved the suspect.
There is only so much the police department can do. We have a social worker on board. We do what we can. But absolutely, I'm confident. I'm disappointed there wasn't more. Maybe we could do it.
Many are surprised there wasn't more police could do. Alex joins us now. And Alex, after those 2019 incidents, what was law enforcement's conclusion about Robert Crima?
Well, Lindsay, investigators reviewed all of those cases and determined after reviewing those cases that he was not what they call a clear and present danger. Lindsay?
And could the father still be held responsible even though his son was 21 at the time of the rampage?
Well, Lindsay, a lot of legal experts believe he could be held responsible because his son acquired most of those guns before he was 21 after his father signed that consent form. Lindsay?
All right, Alex Perez in Highland Park, Illinois for us tonight. Thanks so much, Alex. Tonight, we have a rare look at an elite group of American veterans, former special forces and medics who are now operating near the front lines of the war in Ukraine. Our cameras were with them as they prepared for a top secret mission. Here's ABC's James Longman.
Hi, guys. Tonight, an elite group of U.S. veterans take us inside a life-saving mission in Ukraine. All right. Dark Horse is a group of former U.S. Special Operations personnel. They include Special Forces and Navy SEALs, and they're here in Ukraine to provide expert medical support.
So this is the operational command center in the bunker under the house. Everything here can be stripped out at a moment's notice if they need to get out quickly. And the intelligence they're discussing here has been fed to them by Ukrainians.
Then they're off, heading out towards the front line. Back at base, a colleague monitors the mission and waits for news.
You get into that, that expectant father mode. You know, like that stereotypical, like the guy pacing in the waiting room, waiting for the doctor to come out and tell you what's going on. And the worst part is, you know something's going on, and you're here and you feel helpless.
And Ukraine seems to have given this veteran some meaning.
Old habits die hard. Just about everyone I knew in the veteran community had a mental breakdown when, Afghanistan fell. And then seeing this one, everybody just wanted to do something good.
Around 7 hours later, the others get back from their mission, setting up a mini field hospital.
How did it go?
Good.
There was some indirect fire that came in pretty close, but it's about par for the course out here.
They filmed this footage at the front. This man seriously dehydrated, in need of immediate medical assistance.
Take him right to the back. Here, it's a little bit more World War I style, right? And everybody's just lobbing artillery. Just the other day, it happened to me that I was outside. I got a tank round that hit about 5 or 6 meters from me, blew the building out.
So people watching will think, let's just put it bluntly, that you're kind of nuts. This is not your country. This is not your war. They'll be thinking, well, what are you doing?
I think this is our war. I think this is everyone's war.
All right, thanks to James for that. And now to the UK, where British Prime Minister Boris Johnson resigned today, ending his scandal-plagued time in office. Johnson spoke in front of 10 Downing Street to announce he was stepping down after much of his cabinet and his own party abandoned him. So what does this mean for one of America's closest allies? ABC senior foreign correspondent Ian Pannell reports in from London.
Ravaged by scandal and a growing revolt in his own party, after days of resisting calls for him to go, today Boris Johnson finally accepted his time has run out.
I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks.
As he spoke, crowds came out to boo and heckle him.
After 3 tumultuous years in office, this is the moment that Boris Johnson's political career comes to an end. He's had massive electoral success. He managed to push Brexit through, but his political career ends amid controversy and chaos.
He was badly wounded by Partygate, a series of drunken gatherings at his official residence, breaking strict pandemic rules at the height of the COVID lockdown. Johnson lied about it and was even fined by the police. But the final straw was a revelation that Johnson not only promoted a lawmaker who had a record of drunkenness and allegations of sexual misconduct, but that he lied again, saying at first he hadn't known about it. In the last 2 days, more than 50 ministers and aides resigned from his government. It was a sinking ship. But there were no apologies today. Instead, criticism of those who turned against him.
It's painful not to be able to see through so many ideas and projects myself. But as we've seen at Westminster, the herd instinct is powerful. When the herd moves, it moves.
But controversially, Johnson won't step down immediately, not until a replacement's chosen. Today, even announcing a new cabinet as if nothing's changed.
Ian Pannell joins us now. And Ian, you just said there that Johnson won't step down right away. So what is the time frame at this point and the process for finding his successor as prime minister?
Yeah, that's right, Lindsay. I mean, quite often when a leader, Prime Minister, announces that they're stepping down here outside 10 Downing Street, they're then seen getting into a car, there are tears, there's a farewell almost immediately. That isn't the case with Johnson. He says he's going to stay until a replacement is voted in. So the procedure is the vote takes place within all the lawmakers who belong to Johnson's party, the Conservative Party, and that's run by this committee called the 1922 Committee. It's holding a vote to decide its leadership early next week, and then they have to set a timetable. Now, realistically, there are only 2 weeks left before the summer recess. In other words, 2 weeks before Parliament finishes. So in that amount of time, hopefully, all the other Conservative MPs will get to choose who they want to be the next leader. When that's whittled down to 2 people, it's then pushed out to all the members of the Conservative Party out in the country. They'll spend the summer also deciding. So, as you can see, Lindsay, this isn't a quick process. And when the economy is in so much trouble, inflation is up, growth is down, people are hurting in their pockets, there's a real sense that Johnson should have gone immediately. The country needs leadership, whereas what's more likely to happen is that we're going to have instability now, possibly until as far away as September. Lindsay?
So months, not weeks at this point. Ian Panel, our thanks to you. Iconic actor James Caan, best known for his roles in the Godfather films, has died at the age of 82. His decades-long career began back in the 60s and continued through last year. Here's Whit Johnson with a look back at the life of this Hollywood titan.
Born in New York City in 1940, his father a butcher who escaped Nazi Germany, James Caan would go on to star in iconic roles for 6 decades.
Come here.
Perhaps his most famous role as Sonny Corleone in 1972's blockbuster The Godfather.
What did he say? What did he say? Bada beep, bada bap, bada boop, bada beep. He wants us to send Michael to hear the proposition. And the promise is that the deal is so good that we can't refuse. Hey.
He was incredibly versatile, playing tough guys and sensitive roles. In 1966, playing opposite John Wayne in the Western El Dorado.
In sunshine and in shadow, had journeyed long, singing a song in search of El Dorado.
Tens of millions would watch him play real-life Chicago Bears running back Brian Piccolo in the 1971 TV movie Brian's Song.
I'll see you tomorrow. You say so?
His roles over the years, prolific.
I'm your #1 fan.
1990's Misery, the obsessed fan played by Kathy Bates.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Is this what you're looking for?
Dad!
In his later years, 2003's Christmas movie Elf with Will Ferrell.
I think we should call security. Good idea. I like to whisper too.
Caan at the time on the power of believing.
You know, we all in life have to learn to believe in things or hope that we are able to believe in things we don't see.
In 2017, The Godfather cast Reuniting at the Tribeca Film Festival. This evening, his co-star Robert De Niro tweeting, "I'm very, very sad to hear about Jimmy's passing." And Al Pacino writing, "Jimmy was my fictional brother and my lifelong friend."
Such a versatile actor. Our thanks to Whit for that. When we come back, terrifying surveillance video of a mother clinging to her carjacked vehicle with her children inside. The remarkable scene at the White House, men and women from all walks of life being awarded the nation's highest civilian honor, what President Biden said they all have in common. But up next, with crime and gun violence plaguing communities from coast to coast, our Pierre Thomas sits down with the director of the U.S. Marshal Service to find out what authorities are doing to try to curb the violence.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir. America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers.
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House. Destructive Cat 4 storm.
You're along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye. Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live. America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7. Straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live. It's all about you. The hottest views in daytime are happening right here.
We talk about things on this show that people don't talk about.
That I can't wait to see. Honest takes from strong women.
We need all hands on deck, and we need it right now. This is the time to speak out.
Unafraid to get real.
We stick by our points of view.
We're all seeing it differently, and that's the beauty of The View.
And that's why the most watched #1 daytime talk show is The View. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
America is being poisoned with fentanyl, and we don't even know it.
Just heard my wife screaming. She told me they had just died.
50 to 100 times more potent than morphine.
Keep breathing, come on.
It's poison. It's pure poison.
A few grains of salt worth of fentanyl will kill you.
Just my agency has seized enough to kill the entire country.
ABC News Live presents Poisoned, America's Fentanyl Crisis. The Powerful series, streaming free on ABC News Live. Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
Take a look at this intense surveillance video captured in New Mexico of a mother clinging to the windshield of her car. She had just been carjacked, and her 6-year-old and 11-month-old children were inside the SUV. Fortunately, police found the car abandoned several minutes later. Both children were unharmed. The suspect was later arrested after a police chase on foot. Now to our conversation with the director of the U.S. Marshal Service. ABC News Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas sat down with Director Ronald Davis as he takes on one of the most important roles in law enforcement as the country faces rising crime and gun violence, increased threats to public officials and law enforcement, working to bridge often stark divides that exist in many communities. Their conversation starts off with the results of a recent national fugitive apprehension effort called Operation North Star, which led to the arrest of more than 1,500 violent offenders.
So give us a sense of the operation, how many people you arrested, whether you confiscated guns.
And we identified 10 cities that had the most homicides and shootings. And we basically used this strategic application of enforcement to target not just the city, but the areas of the city that are most plagued by the violence. And during that operation, we arrested over 1,500 fugitives, including 230 murder suspects and over 160 firearms recovered.
Having covered the marshals, I know part of your mantra is if you focus on the most violent offenders, that you can push down some of the crime rates. Do you still believe that?
We do, and I do. I believe that if you are focusing on those who create the most violence, that are responsible for the most violence, two things end up happening. One, you do remove trigger pullers off the street, those who are shooters, and it impacts crime and violence. You also bring justice to the families that have been terrorized by them.
One of the things that's complicating all of this is police officers being shot at more often. Are you seeing that in terms of what you're hearing from your marshals across the country who are in various task forces as well?
We're definitely seeing an increase on assaults against law enforcement. And as an agency, just last year, we arrested over 6,000 murder suspects. So that's a lot of high-risk engagement and contact.
Why are people more willing to fire at police officers and shoot more rounds when they do it?
I wish I had an answer to that. I do feel that it has increased, but I think the response is probably more critically important. That is making sure that all my deputies and task force officers are prepared, that they're trained, that they have the right equipment, that they can de-escalate appropriately, and so that we can reduce deadly encounters to the extent that we can.
I was looking at the DHS threat environment, and they said this is kind of a witch's brew moment where you have lone wolves, ISIS, white supremacists, people who are angry about political issues and the unstable. How concerned are you about the surge in threats against judges at the federal level and state level? And What are you doing to address it?
I'm very concerned because we've seen over the last 5 years threats and inappropriate communications grow at an exponential rate. To allow judges to be threatened with violence to influence those kind of decisions is a threat to our very democracy. So we have to make sure that the third branch of government can operate without the threat of violence and can do it without fear.
You hear about the mass shootings, you see the victims. What's your reaction as a law enforcement official, and what is your resolve to do something about it as the head of the U.S. Marshals?
So the first reaction is always thinking about the community, thinking about the victims and how, on a beautiful warm day in Highland Park, people are going to a parade to celebrate independence and the family time, and how it was just shattered in the most horrific way. So it first goes to thinking about the families, and then thinking about how this is just becoming too normal. And what we need to do as a country. It's such a we problem that you don't have to be the direct victim of a violent crime to be impacted by violent crime. If it's causing you not to go shopping, you're a victim of violent crime. If it's caused you not to go to a parade, you've been influenced by violent crime. And so the more we look at it as a us problem, I think the more global the solutions will be, the more effective they will be.
And how do you do that in a country that has experienced George Floyd, where we know many communities of color are negatively impacted, and yet you need their support in order to help you do community policing, and there's still a level of mistrust? How do you bridge that gap?
I think it's probably because it is mistrust right now, then that relationship is probably more important now than ever. And I think it goes with communication. It goes with trust and building trust, one interaction at a time, one city at a time. In my 40-plus years in public service and over 30 in law enforcement, I've not yet met a community that did not want effective policing. I think you hear people say they may want respectful policing, but they still want an effective law enforcement response.
Now, you use the word respect. I'm an African-American male. I've been pulled over a few times when I thought it was not justified, and it feels disrespectful. And my heart beats a little faster if it's late at night, because I'm not quite sure of what to expect. As a black man yourself, have you been able to use your own experiences in communicating to people?
And I've shared this with going for years with my officers, is that as a father, I have 2 daughters and a son, and I'm a focus on my son because young black male, that after 30 years in law enforcement, I know my colleagues are some outstanding, honorable, ethical men and women. But I still had to have the talk with my son before I would give him the keys to that car and what to do when stopped by the police. And the fact that I have to have that conversation, the fact that it's a mandatory course for families of color, means we have a lot of work to do. I can accept that the vast majority of men and women in law enforcement are outstanding, but also can accept that we have historical contexts and practices that still have disparate impacts. Let them see why people may be apprehensive, why families are maybe some tension, and understanding from someone that also wears the badge and a uniform like they did. So I think that's the value of diversity.
Our thanks to Pierre Thomas for that. Still ahead here on Prime, stunning video just released of a baggage handler who stole a passenger plane that he then intentionally crashed. The officer who shot and killed 12-year-old Tamir Rice gets another job policing, a decision that's been met with an uproar. We'll have more on his current state of employment. And one of the world's most infamous traditions, the running of the bulls, makes a return after its COVID-induced hiatus. We take a look by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day from the Las Vegas Raiders. Sandra Douglas Morgan makes history as the first black female NFL team president. She is one of just 3 women to ever hold that job.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you? Yeah.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
This is ABC News Live. The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers.
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
We're along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
America is being poisoned with fentanyl, and we don't even know it.
Just heard my wife screaming. She told me they had just died.
50 to 100 times more potent than morphine.
Keep breathing, come on. It's poison. It's pure poison.
A few grains of salt worth of fentanyl will kill you.
Just my agency has seized enough to kill the entire country.
ABC News Live presents Poisoned, America's Fentanyl Crisis. The powerful series, streaming free on ABC News Live.
These days, with so much going on, it's hard to keep up.
While others are recapping yesterday's headlines,
We're bringing you the right now.
This is the busy border crossing. Steel barricades, another strike.
The right now look at the day ahead, how it affects you and your family.
Record high gas prices.
The threat of cyber warfare.
Is peace possible?
World News Now beginning at 2 a.m. Eastern, followed by America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
Streaming here on ABC News Live.
Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
As of today, in a big way, we have inaugurated abcnews.com.
A lot has changed in our world since Peter made that announcement. But what hasn't changed is the commitment to groundbreaking reporting and innovation at abcnews.com. And here's to everything ahead.
Welcome back, everyone. Pamplona, Spain is holding its first running of the bulls since the pandemic shut it down back in 2019. Here's a look at the ancient tradition and modern tourist attraction by the numbers. 6 bulls charged through cobbled streets, chasing about 2,000 runners early this morning. The course is about half a mile long. It typically takes the bulls less than 3 minutes to stampede into the bull ring at the end of the route. Today was the first of 8 daily runs to mark Spain's San Fermin festival. No one was gored, with 6 runners and spectators were injured, according to the local hospital. 15 people have died in the bull run since 1910, but many more are gored every year. 8 people fell to the bull's horns in 2019, the last time that the festival was held. The bull run dates back to the 13th century and was established during this week of July in 1591. It now attracts more than 1 million visitors each year. The bulls that race each morning are later killed by Spanish bullfighters. Animal rights activists have campaigned against the tradition, but it remains popular among segments of Spanish society as well as for tourists. And we still have lots to get to here on Prime tonight. Governor Abbott doubles down on Operation Lone Star 1 day after learning it's now coming under federal scrutiny. The former officer convicted for the death of George Floyd is sentenced again. We'll explain. And meet the 2 friends who created a show challenging strangers to do quirky activities for cash. It's tonight's TikTok. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
With so much at stake in our world right now, we wanted to thank you for your trust and for making ABC News America's #1 news.
And thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, the hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
National parks are incredibly safe places. A crime will happen.
Hey, Mama. My wife is fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now. I was shocked. Something's not right.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
Seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know,
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it? Feel smarter.
feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a 3rd hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live. It's all about you.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this.
It's the time of suspicion. The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
Cell phone video shows WNBA star Brittany Griner walking into a Russian courtroom Thursday, pleading guilty to drug possession and smuggling. The two-time Olympic gold medalist who plays for the Phoenix Mercury says back in February, she accidentally packed vape cartridges filled with hashish oil in her luggage, which is illegal in Russia. She was visiting in the off-season to play basketball. Instead, she was detained at the Moscow airport. U.S. Embassy officials have been attending her trial, which began last Friday, this time speaking with Griner and hand-delivering a letter from President Biden. Griner wrote the president earlier this week, pleading for his help, saying, "I'm terrified. I'll be here forever."
A federal court in St. Paul, Minnesota, sentencing former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chovin to 21 years in federal prison for violating George Floyd's civil rights. Chovin was already serving a 22-and-a-half-year sentence on state charges of murder and manslaughter in Floyd's death in May of 2020. The former officer had agreed to a plea deal to serve between 20 and 25 years on the federal charges. As part of that deal, he will serve the federal and state sentences at the same time and be transferred to a federal prison. Texas Governor Greg Abbott today signing an executive order over empowering Texas National Guard troops and Department of Public Safety officials to apprehend immigrants who illegally cross the border between ports of entry and return them to the border. This is Texas's multi-billion-dollar border initiative operation, Lone Star, is now under federal scrutiny, with the Justice Department looking into complaints of civil rights violations against migrants and substandard living conditions for National Guard troops sent to the border. The program was created last March to curb migrant traffic in the state. In a letter obtained by ABC News, the DOJ says it is investigating whether the Texas Department of Public Safety is in compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The officer involved in the fatal shooting of 12-year-old Tamir Rice was briefly sworn in for a new job in Pennsylvania. Former Cleveland police officer Timothy Lohman became the sole officer in Tioga, a borough of 700 people near the New York border. Lohman had shot and killed Rice seconds after responding to a call for someone waving a gun. It was later discovered that Rice was carrying a pellet gun. Lohman was never criminally charged, but was fired from the department in 2017 for lying on his job application. His hiring in Tioga brought protests to borough offices by Konami, the company that produces the game, reflected on the wonderful Yu-Gi-Oh universe Takahashi created, and pledged to carry on his legacy. President Biden honored men and women from all backgrounds with the nation's highest civilian award. Among the big names, soccer star Megan Rapinoe, to Apple founder Steve Jobs, as well as former Senate colleague and friend, the late Senator John McCain. In all, 17 people at the White House awarded with the Medal of Freedom.
This is America.
News about a shocking incident at the Seattle-Tacoma airport. Today, authorities released video that shows how a baggage handler stole a passenger plane back in 2018. ABC's aviation correspondent Gio Benitez has more.
Tonight, new videos show the moments Richard Russell, a baggage handler at Seattle's Sea-Tac airport, stole a commercial passenger plane. The new videos of the 2018 incident show 28-year-old Russell going through airport security. Watch closely. He uses a tow vehicle to get the Alaska Airlines Horizon plane onto the runway. He jumps into the cockpit, other workers oblivious to what was happening. He takes off.
Oh my God, is he okay?
Russell performing aerial stunts over Puget Sound as fighter jets track the plane. Air traffic control tries to get him to land.
All right, Rich, now let's try to land that airplane safely and not hurt anybody on the ground.
I don't know, man, I don't know. I don't want to. I was kind of hoping that was going to be it.
Russell intentionally crashing the plane into an island 30 miles away. He died in the crash.
So unusual and unfortunate. Our thanks to Gio for that. They were brought together by the Vietnam War, and while under enemy fire, 2 soldiers, 1 American and 1 Vietnamese, managed to survive and forge a friendship that carries on half a century later. Here's ABC News' Chief Global Affairs anchor Martha Raddatz with this touching story.
For decades now, these 2 Vietnam War heroes have gotten together every 4th of July, not only to honor our nation, but the unwavering friendship forged in battle more than 50 years ago.
Major John J. Duffy.
But this year was different.
The President has awarded Medal of Honor to Major John J. Duffy for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his own life.
Now 84 years old, John Duffy's memories of that battle still vivid.
This battalion had received an order, fight to the death. And I didn't want to fight to the death, so I decided to give the enemy, kill the enemy as opposed to dying.
Fighting alongside Duffy, Major Lee Van May, second in command of a South Vietnamese airborne battalion.
John and I decided we have to die together or we fight together.
It was 1972. Duffy and May were at Fire Support Base Charlie when it came under withering enemy fire.
A string of fire bases lying between the North Vietnamese base area and sporadic contact with Hanoi troops has been reported at most of them.
It was Major Duffy, despite his own injuries in that relentless enemy assault, guiding those warplanes and targeting anti-aircraft weapons to help save the men who had been ambushed.
You tell these stories so coolly. They're memories, they're powerful memories. You're in your 30s and you're in the middle of this.
I was doing my job.
Lee Van May was injured as well, taking over when his own commander was killed. Both Duffy and May leading the wounded survivors to safety. John Duffy, the last one to leave the base.
Priority one is just rescue John, but John refused to go.
37 lives were saved that day because of the valiant actions of Duffy and May. The rest of the 471-man battalion killed or missing in action. Duffy and May would lose touch after that, May and his family managing a harrowing escape from Vietnam before the fall of Saigon. Duffy eventually moving to California.
And I'd always check with Vietnamese and see if they ever heard of Lee Van May. And we didn't know if he was alive or dead, if he survived or was a prisoner.
But 6 years later, a remarkable discovery.
So one of my friends was checking also, and one of the ice cream vendors says he was my neighbor.
You didn't know he was so close to you?
No, had no idea. No idea at all.
Just 25 miles away.
Tell me what that was like when you saw each other after all those years.
Well, it was joy, happiness. He was alive first and foremost.
I come here, but I intend to find out where John is. So the moment that he comes into my house, and it's everything is upside down, in my mind. It's amazing.
May, who earned a college degree in the U.S., has already received the equivalent of a Medal of Honor twice in South Vietnam. Now, 50 years later, he sits proudly in the audience as the highest military honor was bestowed on his friend, his lifelong